Even as you're following the path alongside of this ordinary northeast Minneapolis house, there's nothing to indicate something very special awaits you in the backyard. A Celtic temple, specially built. It's never been anything other than a place of worship for the Old Belief Society pagans. I arrived at the Temple of the River just as evening was beginning to fall. Drew Jacob, the temple's priest, wouldn't get here for a while yet, so I was free to experience this amazing place alone, in silence. It's a breathtaking achievement, one that pagans across the USA are looking to replicate. As evening fell and the temple took on a soft glow, Drew sat down with PNC-Minnesota to tell us how his group made their dream a reality.
Definitely. When Old Belief Society was founded, which is the organization that we're a part of, our mission statement made it very clear that we have basically a very specific purpose, which is to train clergy and build physical temples, or open physical temples, to make the teachings available to the people. We had it as a goal for a very long time to eventually have a more traditional space for our temple. From the very beginning, when Temple River opened in 2004, we did have a dedicated, worship space. Originally, it was a small attic studio in Dinkytown, and then we moved to a room that I set aside in my house here on the property.
It was in the fall of 2007 that the group decided it was finally time to build a temple.
The whole community around Temple the River, certainly, but there were several of my students who were particularly, just immediately excited and passionate about the idea. And so it was really just kind of sitting down with the students, sitting down with them and talking over what exactly we wanted and what we would need to have a good traditional space, and then kind of breaking up, okay, well, you check in, is it possible to build a traditional roundhouse? Does anyone even have the blueprints for that? You check into, is there a modern equivalent of that? You check into the building code. I'll go look at financing and fundraising and that kind of thing. That was sort of the first step, was to pitch the idea to the community and then really gather their feedback on it as well. And originally we intended to build a roundhouse, which is what the ancient Celts would have actually used as temples. But there's a lot of building code regulations around that. So we went with the slightly more recent Celtic structure, the Irish cottage.
The next step was to meet with city inspectors.
But what's nice is that if you actually schedule a meeting with one of the city planners, or one of the, I should say city inspectors rather, they're willing to sit down and look at the project. They'll give you 10 or 20 minutes of their time and give you a pretty quick, sense of what aspects of the design are going to be maybe possible. So it was really just a process of meeting with the city inspector, talking with an engineer. We also met briefly with an architect to see if they had any ideas or might be more of a help. And I think that if you want to build a really traditional historic structure, it's going to cost a lot of money in the planning stage, even though the structure itself will be a lot cheaper because the community can build it, the materials aren't as expensive or modern. On the other hand, going with a more modern building, you can just get right past a lot of that. And that's what we ended up doing. We went with a very standard, luckily an Irish cottage is in the same basic style as a modern house. So, we didn't have to worry, well, will the rafters hold up the snow load, or will the walls collapse under this or that? No, they knew right away that it wouldn't, and it's a very, standard style of house. And that made it a lot easier once we switched to the Irish cottage model. So even though it can be very frustrating to deal with all the regulations and to plan everything and to really make a detailed strategic plan around a project, I'm seeing more and more organizations, more and more polytheist organizations making the effort or getting interested in how to do that and do it the right way and keep everything above board and careful. That's a really good sign, because that's a sign that we're really launching to sort of the next step in our community and sort of maturing as organizations.
In part 2 of our interview with Mr. Jacob, he talks about how groups can overcome challenges, and we get into the actual construction of the temple. For PNC Minnesota, I'm Kara Schultz.